Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Daily Global COVID-19 Show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and we're on episode 247. We're counting down to episode 250 on Sunday night, after which we will go from a daily program to a once or twice a week program for the foreseeable future. We're so grateful to all of you for joining us these last 7-8 months as we have covered the biggest story of our lives. Today, we are taking a little bit of a break from all the medical and pandemic upheaval and election upheaval to talk about the arts, as we have done on multiple occasions during this run. We've talked about Hamilton the musical, we've talked to entertainers, we've talked to musicians, we've had singers and all kinds of folks over the last 8 months. And today we are talking about Fiddler on the Roof. Yes, the iconic musical is getting a full documentary treatment on PBS tomorrow with Fiddler, A Miracle of Miracles, the first documentary on the iconic musical on PBS's Great Performances. And we will talk about the musical's global success and its legacy. And we have two very special guests with us. Jackie Hoffman is here at Jackie Hoffman 16. And Jackie is an actor in Fiddler in Yiddish and multiple other performances and musicals. And we'll also be joined by Joanne Borts, who is at Lush and Hora, and also an actor in Fiddler in Yiddish. And as you can see, many other wonderful titles as well. You'll meet both of them in just a minute. If you have seen Fiddler on the Roof at any point in your life, either the movie or one of the musical live theater performances, please tell us, and we'd love to hear all about it. Meanwhile, let me say hi, everybody. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful to all of you and the incredible support you've given this show all of these months. I'm coming to you live from Puerto Rico, where we are watching the spike here as well, though it isn't as bad as it is, the resurgence as it is in New York. And if you haven't seen the show before, in our first 240 episodes, we have had more than 1 million viewers, 156 million social impressions, 441 guests, including 249 women, and we're upping that ratio again tonight. We've had guest speakers from 72 cities and 20 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. You can find our archives at youtube.com/Sreenet, and you can find us on Scroll Global and Scroll.in. We're very grateful to our sponsors and to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please follow both of them, and we want to thank them for all the incredible work they have done with us all these months. All right, are you ready to talk Fiddler on the Roof? I know I am. I'm super jazzed to do that, and we want to welcome onto our stage here our guests. Joanne and Jackie are both here with us, and we're going to talk Fiddler. Hello, folks.
Hey.
Thank you so much for being here. We're very grateful to have you. And my first question to our guests is always, how are you? Where are you? And how has your family been coping with COVID? So Joanne, you want to go first?
Oh, okay. I actually am in Florida right now. I just got off a plane. I'm dealing with my parents' home, which is kind of amazing. So I arrived today, and here's all the stuff that's in my parents' house. My family is doing really well in New York City, and I will be really happy to not have to fly anymore because flying is a little insane. However, I will say, because we spend so much time alone and there's been a lot of isolation, being around a gajillion people at the airport today was in many ways very rejuvenating. So I have hope for the future, and especially the theater, because I think people are really going to want to interact with human beings again.
I agree about that. Did you wear like a double mask and a face shield? That's what we did when we traveled.
I literally have a double mask, and I have Google goggles, and I have a hat with a shield built in, so I look like a beekeeper. It's really embarrassing.
Well, but it keeps you safe, and that's what's so important. Yeah, fingers crossed. Let's go to Jackie. How are you? And tell us all.
I'm good. I'm in my kitchen table in New York City. I wish I was in Florida.
No, you don't.
Anybody I love in my family is already dead, so we're not really affected by COVID. I had it in late March. I was very lucky. I presented very mild symptoms. My husband became quite ill, but he, thank God, turned around and it was much better.
All right. Well, we're glad to hear that he's better. We wanted to acknowledge that we're talking about something light in the middle of a pandemic as it's spiking, and we have the most number of hospitalizations and the most number of cases we've ever had in all of this. And when we started this show, folks, back in March, we thought we'd have like maybe a couple of months of lockdown, not that it would still be going 8 months later and it'd be getting worse. I mean, it's just unfathomable that that's the situation. And of course, one of the many things we've lost is the theater. And I'd like both of you to kind of reflect on that a little bit. I know Joanne was a little more upbeat in her prognosis.
Always. This is a good combination of guests. It's light and dark.
Well, we need both.
Comment on Joanne's Twitter handle. I don't know if you know what it means, Sree.
Well, she explained it to me, but why don't you, let's hear your version.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw it and I just thought it was hilarious.
No, I wanted the audience to know it too, so go ahead.
Lush and hara is the Torah term for evil, idle talk, gossip. And
one day there will be a CD or a show or a podcast.
Or a comedy team.
A comedy team. This is part of my personality, Lush and Hara.
So let's talk a little bit about, and by the way, even as we laugh with all the pain, I tell people we have to laugh, because if we don't, we will be crying given the state of the world today. So let's go to Jackie. Tell us what you have, how has the pandemic affected your career, and what have you been seeing, and the news about Broadway being closed even further out than people had expected. There's a cascading effect on all of that. So could you talk a little bit about that, Jackie?
Well, yeah, I can't even, I'm fumfering, as we'd say in Yiddish. It's not just a job that's gone, it's almost an entire profession that's been wiped out. And I was very fortunate to have I did a voice on a cartoon from March to September, and that was over. But just to have no live theater, not only to not be in, but not to go to, it's I mean, I'm really grieving over it. It's an incredible loss, and it's stripping New York almost of its identity for me. I mean, New York was synonymous with theater. So it's just incredibly depressing, and I admire people who are doing these things over Zoom and trying to bring back, and it's very frightening. I don't know what the future holds, when people will be brave enough to sit in an audience together again. But I hope I live long enough to see it.
Oh, you will. But I certainly know what you mean. Let's go to Joanne for her thoughts.
Well, I guess I feel like I have to have faith that it's going to come back. I'm also on the board at Actors Equity Association, so this is a conversation we have every day, because it's about bringing back our industry. And like Jackie said, it's not just about the actors and the stage, it's about the people who are coming in the audience, and the restaurants in the neighborhood, and the hotels in the neighborhood, and we have our industry really is the heartbeat of New York City. So I think that's going to be it's going to be a really great success when it comes back. And I also think that we have to think about the entire country, because the world wants to get back to interacting with people artistically and just humanely, and And I think that the small theaters around the country are just chomping at the bit to get back on the boards, because I think people really want to interact with humans.
I completely agree about that. Let's just see some of the comments that are coming in. Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village, once the center of Yiddish theater, he says. He's also watched all 247 episodes, is an incredible supporter and friend. Pradnya, who's watching from Silver Spring, says, oh my good Lord, you know I'm going to spend the entire show quoting lyrics. You're welcome to do that. Put that in your comments. We will show them. Neil Parekh, who works with us at Digimentors, our company, says, I'm so excited about tonight's episode and the documentary tomorrow night, joining from Springfield, Virginia. And Pradnya started already. And Charles and Mary are watching from New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us. They're great friends and also sponsors of our show. We're very grateful. Mark is watching from Durham, North Carolina. And Mark says, Florida and even North Carolina have been hit by horrible weather, flash floods and all. And Pradnya says, all the more reason for us to sing. And Mark says, yes, I love to sing even during bad weather. Marilyn says, I love Fiddler. I have Tevye on my wall, she says. And that's interesting. And my mom is watching.
I have Tevye in my will.
My mom is watching from Kerala in India. Have either of you been to India? No. So Fiddler is big in India. You know, they've had performances all over the country over the years, and it's just something that my kids, my twins, when they were really young, they could sing Matchmaker, because we keep showing it to them. In the early edition of Hulu, when Hulu first launched, one of the few films it had was Fiddler on the Roof, and so that's how I was able to show it to them. And back then, and I because I was a technology journalist, I did one of the first stories about Hulu, so that's how I was able to show this to them. And look at what Neil's doing; he's tagging all his friends from Wesleyan who know the show. And everyone, please do this. Share this with your friends. Tag them, and they'll take a break from all the terrible news in the world and join these wonderful actors and talk to us about what's going on. And Jonathan says, along 2nd Avenue, just below 14th Street, also known as the Jewish Rialto. And Miriam says, I'm watching from Hell's Kitchen in New York City, just next to the Broadway Theater District. And Pradnya says it's on Netflix now. I didn't know that. And Stefan says, oh my God, Fiddler on the Roof was my late father's favorite play of all time. He lived for the soundtrack. And Pradnya's tagging people. So let's set the scene here and tell folks why, again, we're doing this. Tomorrow on PBS, there is the debut of a documentary that both of these folks have already seen. It was running in select theaters and things like that, but now is going to be on PBS. And tomorrow is a broadcast premiere. And before we talk further, we're going to show the trailer for the show, so that it'll get us talking about it and understanding what exactly we are looking at. So let me bring onto the stage, onto the screen. I'm so caught up in this being the stage here, and I'm going to play this. It's a 30-second excerpt, and we can show the longer clip a little later. Here we go.
Tradition. It became one of Broadway's best musicals ever. A musical about a bunch of old Jews in Russia. Fiddler on the Roof. Whether you out of your mind. From page to stage, see how Fiddler triumphed on Broadway, around the world, and through the decades. It was spectacular. Fiddler captures big moments in our lives. Tradition breaking, tradition renewing. Discover Fiddler, a miracle of miracles on Great Performances.
And there is that ending of that line. That's awesome. So let's go to our guests, and let me introduce them properly again. We are joined tonight on screen here by Jackie Hoffman and Joanne Borts, who are on Fiddler in Yiddish, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. To each of you, Joanne first, what does Fiddler mean? Before you had a chance to perform in it, what did it mean to you?
Fiddler on the Roof is, I had the privilege to perform it many, many times, like close to 2,000 performances, if not more. I was able to perform it with Topol on tour on Broadway. I actually did it with Topol in Japan, in Tokyo and Osaka, and it's an incredibly universal story. And like they say in the documentary, but it happened to us when we went to Japan as well, that it's such a universal story that people in Japan didn't understand how people in the United States understood this story, because they felt like it was so Japanese. And it's a story about family, it's a story about Jewish tradition, but it's also a story about modernization. It's actually one of the few musicals from the traditional musical theater canon that actually has stood the test of time, because if you think about it, this is a story about the women in Tevye's life. This is a story about his relationship with his bride, Golda. It's a story about his 5 daughters and how they're rebelling and how they want to become modern, and they want to love who they want to love. And all of these little vignettes and stories resonate very well in a 21st century world. Love is love is love.
Oh, thank you so much. Let's go to Jackie for her thoughts.
Well, unlike Joanne, I hadn't performed it ever until I performed it in Yiddish in 2018, which I think it is absolutely the best version by far. But it was so, if you growing up Jewish in a musical Jewish household, it was the Jewish musical. And yes, everybody has this warm attachment to it. Like the Japanese, it's their story. And I'm sure in India, they felt it was their story. And that's what's so beautiful about it. But it was such an emblem of pride to wear. We're Jewish and we have a musical that it's all ours, you know? So grew up playing the vinyl in the house and knowing all the music and going to all the synagogue productions and the yeshiva school productions, and remarkably avoided being in it until very late in my life. And I'm so glad I did.
That is so cool. Let's look at some of the comments coming in. Marilyn performed it in the 5th grade. Marilyn is one of our guests from a previous episode. We call her the Queen of Staten Island, and she's now saying she performed in the 5th grade. Cherry is watching from India and says, lovely movie with great message and music. And let's see, Vandana says, Vandana is one of our producers. Fiddler is big in India. Sunrise, Sunset was a favorite at school. Our teachers would sing a more upbeat version to the graduating class. Pradnya says she sang it in high school. Neil says, I didn't see the original, but my parents had the original soundtrack from Zero Mostel. We saw the Topol version when I was in high school. And I think we had Debbie watching from DC. I saw the original Fiddler on Broadway in 1964. Yeah. So this is awesome. And then we have lots more comments coming in from folks. Alec Lewis says, PBS does the Lord's work when it comes to capturing great theater and making it accessible. And Alec also says, what great thespians here today. I had the pleasure of seeing Jackie and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory a few years ago. If I Was a Rich Man was a classic in the car when I was younger. Love Fiddler. Isn't that awesome? So folks, please tag your friends. Please share this with them. What a great conversation and a chance to, as we keep saying, be distracted from all the mess that's going on around us. I also want to share with everyone, we've been talking about the Fiddler in Yiddish, and we heard Jackie lay down that it's the best version. And so I'm sure there would be like, we could have a little, some folks might disagree if it's the best or is it one of the best. But of course, it's the best because both of you were in it. So talk to us about this and what exactly the Yiddish version was with English subtitles. Who would like to go?
Joanne.
Okay, so I agree with Jackie. So I've done all these different productions. This was actually technically my 3rd big production. And I think the reason it's the best is because it harkened back to the language that the stories were written in originally. So when the translation happened, Shraga Friedman wrote these translations in 1965 or 1966, and he was in Israel. He had already written a translation in Hebrew, and it was running, and it was very successful. And he wanted to try it in Yiddish, and his translation goes literally back to the original Sholem Aleichem stories. And so I know that when I was learning a lot of these lines, I thought, wow, this is a very beautiful and sophisticated Yiddish, because I grew up going to Yiddish school, and I went to Yiddish camp and speaking Yiddish. But my Yiddish is much more conversational, even though I went to school. But the Yiddish in the show is so juicy and so evocative. And I think that it was really a testament to the production and a testament to the translation itself, that people in the audience forgot that they were watching a show in a foreign language. They just absorbed it. I mean, the first words that we really sang in the show were tradicja, and people understood what the show was going to be about without having to actually speak the language fluently, and they got much more out of it than I think people do when you're watching a show which you know is not in an original language. It was very satisfying.
And thank you. And let's just we'll play a little excerpt in a minute, but tell us about your role and how that came to be.
Me, Joanne?
Yes, please.
So I played Shandel. I was Muttel's mother, but I also had the great privilege to understudy Fruma Sarah and Grandma Tzeitel and Golda and Yenta, played by Jackie Hoffman, saving the best for last. And I have to say, it was so much fun to understudy Jackie, because she's really, really funny. And she brought things to this role that I've never seen in any other production. And Joel Grey had some amazing ideas when he was directing. I have to say that was also such a thrill and such an honor to work with him. Like, after I had my very first understudy rehearsal, we went through the first scene, and Joel says, Joanne, come with me, we're gonna go to lunch. Let's talk about your character. And as an understudy, to have that much agency and that much face time with your director, your Oscar and Tony winning director, who wants to sit and eat borscht with you and talk about the character of Yenta and how Yenta's going to fit into my body, because my body's going to have a different flavor than Jackie's body. And it was so beautiful to share this experience. And so I love watching Jackie do the show, and I loved stepping into her shoes when she was doing something better.
Jackie, over to you.
Not something better, something else.
Something else.
Yeah, unlike Joanne, Joanne's also a fluent Yiddish speaker, as we should know, and most of us are not. But what is the questions about the role? Yeah, sure. The role was the iconic Yenta the matchmaker, who's become such a character in not only theater but just in stories, just throughout culture. And the word Yenta was even used to become synonymous with a gossip, someone who speaks Lashon Hara, a Yenta. And it was just, I was so intimidated because it had been, Molly Pecan made it, emblazoned it onto the film, and so many women had played it. And it was so, through the help of Joel and this amazing cast, to find a new take on it, trying to, what is it about her? What, she's such a, here she is in the early 20th century. She's a businesswoman. She doesn't have children. She lost her husband. She's very wily and very funny. And so there were all of these really fun things to play. And I just, in terms of the last question, I wanted to also speak a little bit about the Yiddish, what made this particular production so special, in addition to what Joanne so articulately stated, was that there was a very kind of magical, hate that word, but a quality that the Yiddish brought to it that was so pure and so raw and so emotional, and it really can't be explained. And people from all over the world who saw this thing, a lot of who weren't Jewish and had no history and had never seen the show, became so caught up and so emotional. I think it's the power of the language. It was the power of the Yiddish that made it just so knock down, drag out, crying, emotional, gut-wrenching, spectacular.
In terms of, the fact that you weren't fluent, you were saying about in Yiddish, how does that work for musical theater to be able to, could you do that with any other language, or Yiddish makes it?
I don't know yet. I haven't tried another one, but this one I learned phonetically. We had very good coaching, and we had actors who were not Jewish. We had dancers who had never heard a word of Yiddish in their lives, and they grasped it masterfully. Joel worked on the scenes in Yiddish, and then he worked on them in English, so we would have the emotional background and emotional arc of the scene, and we knew what we were doing, and then we layered the Yiddish on top of that.
All right, so let's watch a little bit of this. So this, I guess, is the trailer. So we will get a flavor of the Yiddish version of Fiddler on the Roof. Here we go.
A fiddler Achendach. Meshuggah, nein? Aber bei uns in Anatevke ist jeder einer ein Fiddler Achendach. Danke nur a Größe, she's a Masoyin, was wir sind in Blau. Es hat a Pole, was dem Metatonen, und schon die Celina, was auf die Geschau. Die Barcelona, die Brücke, und Jesus soll sie sein. Und der Masol ist die Barus, nach was Jesus, alle Geile.
Wow, that's great.
And you'll notice we had a female fiddler.
Yes, I did notice that. So
who really played the fiddle? She was actually not just an actor acting it out. She played every note perfectly every night. She was killing it.
Oh, that's just awesome. Our co-producer Rose Horowitz is here. She's going to join us to say hello and maybe ask some questions. Hi, Rose.
Hi.
Hi, Rose. Thanks for getting us all together.
Okay.
And we're just chit-chatting here, and it's great to have you. Let's just look through some of the comments that have come in. Sudha Parekh, Neil's mom, says, when I came to New York in 1971, I saw Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway. I thought it was an Indian story, and a lot of people have made that. Debbie says, hi to Joanne Borts, my
Deborah
favorite. I love kids and Yiddish. And David Katz says, I played Golda in my bedroom once. And people are tagging their friends. It's just great to see everybody tagging their friends. And Renee says hello. Renee Weissmack says hi to Joanne. And
everybody's saying hello to Joanne.
No, we've had people say hi to you too.
The Yiddish world is very thick.
Yeah,
it's very
connected.
Yeah, so it's the same with the Indian world. Leslie says, I saw you and Jackie in Fiddler in Yiddish twice. the last night was in New York was so memorable. My first exposure to Fiddler on Broadway was the Herschel Bernardi, but grew up with the album with Zero Mostel. I've got to say, having not seen the Yiddish version, even the songs that we did see, you could tell which songs they were, and that feeling, that choreography, all of that was very, very special. So great to see that. And so many other comments coming in. I'm kind of finding it hard to keep up. Randy Topper says, this was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And Pradnya says, you don't have to know Yiddish, but now I wish I did. That was one of the marketing lines, was you don't have to know it's Yiddish, you don't have to know Yiddish. And Renee says, I remembered my Yiddish all over again. And the show runs on the PBS show is premiering Friday night on PBS and will be on various stations around the country. So I hope people get to watch. And let's have Rose ask a couple of questions here.
Hi. I was lucky enough, I really wanted to see the show because we saw, I think it was with Joel Grey, and he performed with the whole cast tradition in the Red Bucket Follies.
All right.
Yeah, so it was 2018. I was trying to remember when, and I said to us, we have to see that, and somehow we never did. So, but it was great it was a fabulous number, and the show, and I've been able to. I saw Jackie. I saw you in Hairspray.
Wow.
And it's just really a thrill to have you both here. So thank you.
Thank you.
If you played, let me ask you, if you could play any role in Fiddler, would it be the one you played, or what role would it be?
Well, I
know you played Yenta. Yeah.
I love the role I had, but I wouldn't mind a crack at Golda. Although learning that much Yiddish almost would give me a nervous breakdown. Joanne got to go on as Golda because she understudied Golda, and she was spectacular.
I had 2 hours notice. I was terrified, and Jackie was an amazing dressing room mate. She was like, "You're cool. You just," and I was like praying every morning before I went on. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, and I would love another chance to do it again, so I could sort of fix the little things that I got wrong when I did it the first time, because when you do something more than once, you get a chance to own it. But if there was a role that I wanted to play in Fiddler on the Roof, it would be Tevye. I want to play that role.
Okay, well, we'll see if has there been a female Tevye ever?
There hasn't, and I will say, I never wanted to play that role as much as I did after I watched Steven Skybell do it, because he is the most brilliant actor next to Jackie Hoffman that I have ever worked with, seen. Literally, you would stand on stage with him, am I right, Jackie? And I would want to stop the scene and walk around and figure out what is it that he's doing that is so brilliant, because he's literally just so in the moment. And really, I don't want to insult any of the other Tevyes, but his Tevye was sublime, and yeah.
You couldn't not be mesmerized every second he was speaking and not speaking.
Yeah.
And Joanne, you shared with me how something about Jackie in the role as Yenta. So.
Which one?
That she was amazing to work with and such a great.
Yes,
she did a little too good of a job as my understudy, but it
was a pleasure to understudy you. She was so kind, and it's hard being an understudy. You have to go and sit at somebody else's spot, and you don't really get to own something. Like a role, you get to kind of rent it. Mm-hmm. But Jackie really let me, move in for a while. It was really exciting. And then every time I kind of stepped back into my own role, it was fun to see where Jackie hit those same moments and go, oh yeah, I should do that the next time. Oh, that's a good one. Let me hit that. So
how many times would you say you went on for her?
I went on a lot, right? I went on I would say 50 times.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I got a couple of TV shows. I had a hip surgery. She got a good crack at it.
I really did.
That's great.
Can I also say that as someone who was a Yiddish speaker, and I grew up and I went to camp and I went to school and I did all these things, when I was learning all of Jackie's lines, it was unbelievable how difficult it was. And I thought, if I'm having this much trouble, I can't imagine how all of the people who were not brought up with Yiddish are doing this. So my hat was off to every person in that company, so brilliant and worked so hard, and Yiddish was so tasty and delicious. And I have to say, as I don't know, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who speak another language, and you're very, very protective over your language. And Yiddish speakers are particularly protective over our language. And the way our company really did the work to make it all so authentic, we had a lot of people really complimenting the Yiddish, which is super high praise.
That's wonderful. I think I read that maybe 16 out of 26 did not know Yiddish. So it's a very hard language to just pick up. So how did how did people learn that? They had tutors, or were they memorizing their lines, or how?
Everybody had different techniques, but we had coaches who worked with us extensively because, like Joanne mentioned, there are hardcore Yiddish fans who were ready to critique us, and we had to meet very high standards. But we had a couple of great coaches, Muttel and Sabina, and Zalman, the musical director, would help us. And it's just a matter of learning, drilling. But I say this every interview I do about this show, that there were understudies who understudied several roles, and they had to learn several roles in Yiddish. And I marvel. I don't know how they did it.
Awesome. And what was it? Can you talk a little more about working with Joel Grey?
You want to take that, Jackie?
We'll share. Joel's just, he's like a 4'8" tall pillar of theatrical history. The legend.
Can you tell us about his father? And I've seen him a little bit.
Mickey Katz. Yes, his father was a very well-known at the time, a Borscht Belt comedian who would do schmaltzy Yiddish parodies and Yiddish numbers, and was a great Yiddish comic. So it was in Joel's blood. He didn't grow up in a religious Jewish home, but he grew up with a very pintele Yid, with a spark of being Jewish. And he just brought so many years of knowledge, and not only showbiz from like the schmaltzy showbiz world, but real work and he did such a magnificent job. I had no idea what it was going to be like working with him. I was very excited to work with him, but he really stripped away any fake quality of it, any cornballness of it, and he really got everybody to come from a really honest, guttural place and really turned it in an emotional, pure performance. He really he got the best out of his actors.
That's great to hear. And Joanne?
Well, I think one of the things that was so interesting was because he was working in two languages. And he's not necessarily fluent in Yiddish, but he certainly he grew up around it. But you would do.
I saw him in a benefit in Connecticut at Fairfield University, and he sang several songs in Yiddish and, paid homage to his father.
Yeah, so he was around it. But, in terms of communicating in Yiddish, it's not just song and dance. It's words and story. And he had us rehearse the scene in Yiddish, so you got the rhythm of the words, and then he had you go back and not do the English line, but translate the words that you just said. So kudos to the people who were drilling and teaching the show, because they weren't just teaching you how to say a word, they were making sure that you knew every word, what the derivation of the word was, how it related to the sentence. I mean, there were only 2 or 3 real Yiddish speakers in the show, people who had some experience in the Yiddish theater. But when you have to go back and then take the translation and translate it back, you are digging into meaning that is it's so much richer than if you were just speaking and singing in a language that's your first language.
It sounds like a Talmudic study.
Unbelievably, it was very exciting to do that way. And again, there are very few shows that the original director will come to understudy rehearsal. Like the privilege of that is unbelievable. And then the idea that he also understood that you're not the same person, that the person is who you're understudying. And so you're going to tell the story in a different way. In fact, did you know this, Jackie? The first time I went on, he and I had a conversation about, and he said, you're tall, you're whatever. I think that you need to be kind of haughty and judgmental. So my first performance, I was haughty and judgmental. And then the second day, like the matinee, and believe me, I was just trying to stay alive, right? You said a lot of words. And then the next day he came in and he goes, I had a dream last night. And I think I want you to be a bag lady. And this was 15 minutes before I went on. And he was looking around your stuff going, does she have any fuzzy slippers? That's how I ended up with fuzzy slippers. Does she have fuzzy slippers or something? I want you to be a bag lady.
Great. It's so amazing. It's so fun to hear this story. We've been
and on the same role that, 24 hours later was something else. It was really, he was remarkable.
That's great.
Can't hear you, Sree.
Yeah.
Sree.
Sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt and say that I'm missing this is such a great conversation. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are so many good comments. I want to make sure some of us saw them. Renee says, I remembered my Yiddish all over again. Marilyn saw it with Harvey Firestein. And Alan says, hi, Jackie. And Max says, my favorite musical. And Renee says the show is about tradition, which all cultures can appreciate. It's also about hope, love, and family. And Randy says that I saw it already on Amazon. So is the documentary on Amazon, or is the Yiddish version on Amazon? I'm not sure.
I think that you were able to buy it on Amazon Prime before it went on.
There's a documentary.
Yeah, the documentary was available for purchase.
Okay. And Alan says, was the Yiddish version videotaped? Any chance we'll ever get to see it?
They were trying really hard to do it before we closed. And we were supposed to go to China in January.
Of all places.
And then it sort of got canceled. And then we were supposed to go on the road with it. Actually, we would have been on the road right now. And I think they were going to try and record it at the Amundsen, but maybe when we get back to it, we'll record it.
By the way, Alan Katz is Rose's husband and was a guest on a very early episode here where we talked about humor and children's literature. It was one of the funniest days that we had during the pandemic. We learned a lot. Pradnya says it's a miracle, one wonders miracle of miracles that it was available like this. Neil says with phonetic translations, it's hard. It's not hard to learn Yiddish, Hebrew. It's very possible. I learned the Friday night service that way in college. And Pradnya says, isn't it strange to be premiering this particular documentary on Friday night, meaning on
I was thinking that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure why they did that. Neil says the same thing. that they were surprised. Neil says, of course, not all Jews observe the Sabbath. I was just saying there's a large potential audience they were leaving out. And Pradnya says the same thing. It seems dissonant. Sudha says, since Neil lived in a Jewish dorm at Wesleyan and attended Friday prayer meetings and learned Yiddish, many people thought that Neil was Jewish. So let's do this. Let me kick one Indian guy out and put another Indian guy in here. Neil Parekh is joining us. Neil, how are you? Neil, can you see us? I'm not sure he can, but he'll start speaking when he's ready. But he's such a fan, we had to have him share some of his thoughts on the show as well. Mark says, my dad's lady is a big fan of art in the theater community and a member of the New York Jewish community. Linda Bellin, who has worked in the art.
Hi, how are you?
And in New York.
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi, Neil.
Sorry, 1 second.
All right. And
you
Renee
can hear me
says,
now? Can you hear me now?
Fiddler inspired me to take up Yiddish language again. And Pradnya says that Neil is a Hindu. Go ahead, Neil, your thoughts.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. Sorry about that. First of all, I just want to thank you for being on the show today. As Sree mentioned, we've spent the last several months talking about COVID-19, talking about politics the last several days. Fiddler means so much to so many people, as you've seen in the comments. It touches so many nerves. People are so close to it. My own personal story, I just need to share. In first grade at Fieldston Fieldston Lower School in Riverdale, I learned all of the songs to Fiddler with overhead transparencies, music class. That's all we did. We sang songs. I remember seeing the 6th graders perform it when I was in 2nd grade. And I saw it in college. I saw Topol, as I mentioned earlier in the comments. And I tagged a bunch of my friends from Wesleyan, which I have to represent Wesleyan over here. All, late at night, full-throated sing-alongs to Fiddler in the Bayit, in the Jewish house on campus. So just to be able to hear your stories, hear your experience, the Fiddler in Yiddish, and knowing how important that was for the community. Just an absolute thrill to have you on the show. So just thank you, thank you, thank you.
We're all connected, the Indians and the Yentas, because there's a TV show called Indian Matchmaker.
Oh yeah, we had
the director and some of the actors on the show.
Yeah.
Where did you see Topol? Because I did all of the Topol tours and Broadway.
This is what my mom will. My friend Michael Bernstein from college. Yes, we have stories. Michael Bernstein, who is a rabbi now. I like to say I fell in with a really bad crowd my sophomore year at college. 7 out of my 10 closest friends all went to rabbinical school. So it tells you kind of who I was hanging out with. But I believe it was either 90 or 91 that we saw Topol on Broadway.
Oh, because we also toured it a lot before we got to Broadway, and then I did another tour. So.
Yeah, and my mom is watching. She can fact check me if I'm wrong. But yeah, we went down. It was a whole family thing. And like I said, this is something. I mean, all the stories. The movie, reached out to so many people in terms of people understanding the stories and the themes, and of course, basing all the stories on Shalom Aleicum's original content. I mean, what rich history to draw upon, and regardless of when you're watching it, right? It's based. I mean, I think it's a lot of it is rooted in the early years, more the 1905 type of time period, as opposed to the Russian Revolution, which was later in 17. But timeless, just timeless. One question I wanted to ask you, and Mark is asking about comparisons to modern times. Are there other shows that you can think of that either you've been involved with or that you have shared with others that have been as strong of a cultural touchstone? outside of maybe the kind of the Jewish tradition, but does anything compare to Fiddler? Even come close?
Jackie, I'm going to let you take that one.
Not that I could think of that's so universal. I mean, I thought when you asked that, I thought of Hairspray because of the the plus size girl triumphing and rising to become a hero, and the racial component and dealing with racism, and that had kind of like has a kind of a global feel and impact, but nothing that's touched, I think, everywhere in the world, and has the staying power and the endurance of Fiddler.
It really is. Joanne?
I have my older brother. We saw it. Maybe we saw it. It was playing at Westbury, maybe, early on, and my older brother just would sing "If I Were a Rich Man" all day and night, and we somehow caught it on tape, and all these years later, and I played all the songs on the piano, and just loved the show. And I can, and I guess the song, how does it go? The one where she sings about leaving
Far from the Home I Love.
Yes, Far from the Home I Love. And I guess I just read something, that you see that song differently when you're a young girl, like when I was hearing it, and now when I have my own children, it's and a lot of songs, I guess, can be that way. With Sunrise, Sunset, you could be imagining yourself as the bride, or you're the parent seeing your children go off.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
On one of the comments, Michael Bernstein said that Joel Bernstein was a Wesleyan grad with Harvey Farley. I did the show with Joel Bernstein as well.
Did you really? Wow, that's really great.
Yeah.
Marilyn.
When I was on tour with Fiddler with Topol.
And Marilyn was saying that she had a school friend who played Fromosera in that year. I don't know which year she's referring to. But you said that you were on tour before you went to Broadway with Topol?
I was in the 90 revival, so you saw me.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah. I was wearing a Christmas tree dress in the wedding. I doubt you remember that.
Oh, okay.
It was the weirdest thing. I don't understand
a Christmas tree dress? Really?
I looked like a Christmas tree. It was literally this green, shapeless dress with hot pink flowers all over.
Not a menorah bush? A Christmas tree?
No. It was very strange. I have to say, the costumes for this revival that we just did were essentially black and white. And then they added a little bit of color when you fell in love, when the characters...
Oh, interesting.
Right? And so the design was really beautiful, and it helped unfold and tell the story. And the irony is that Jackie's character, Yenta, from the very beginning was wearing like a red hat and a red shawl, because she was the one who was teaching everyone how to fall in love. So that was kind of beautiful. But the original costume design is very... I know people think brown. Oh, Fiddler on the Roof is a lot of sepia and brown. But the truth is, Cycle's colors are always blue, and Huddle's colors were always lavender, and then Chava's colors were always kind of earth toned, and the production itself was incredibly colorful. So my Christmas tree dress was just part of the colorful one.
You're saying for your production that was the color in general?
The production that you saw.
Yeah. Just that one, sure. How did that compare? I'm curious in terms of, that's really interesting to get that kind of insight on the costume design and the wardrobe choices. Any comparisons or any contrast with the earlier productions, Zero Mostel, of course, or later with Harvey Fierstein? Any other interesting wardrobe choices that you know of?
I mean, our Anne Holdward, our costume designer for this revival, for the Yiddish revival, she worked on the original, and she worked on the original tour when it went out with Herschel Bernardi. So
the original.
Right. She knew the original costume design intimately, and she was able to with all of that knowledge, create something else and create something very beautiful and very simple.
I will say that the other interesting part, again, about how important Fiddler is, and I'm seeing if I can find it quickly in the comments, but I actually learned this for the first time on the air. So that's my mom. She always watches Sree's shows. I don't get to watch all of his shows. I didn't know that she had seen Fiddler back in '71 with Zero Mostel. We had the album at home. We had the LP. I grew up listening to it. But this is how important. You see so many people drawing their own connections to it. Renee is talking about how it's always wonderful to learn about other people's culture, and she still gets to do this as a New Yorker. This is responding to Pradnya's comment about sending her kids to the Shomrei Amuna preschool in Montclair. One of the best experiences they've ever had being part of the community, which is great. So this is just great. Can you just for folks who are watching at home, behind you? So I noticed a little fiddler on the table. A little early for the menorah, but that's okay. But what's that artwork? What's that painting right there?
Oh, this is a Chagall.
Oh, wow.
This is one of the photographs that they were looking at, one of the Chagall photographs that eventually Boris Aronson did a lot of the original set design. But this is the fiddler. This is the Chagall Fiddler on the Roof. And it says, Marc Chagall's 1920 tempera, gauche and opaque white on canvas. And it was called Music.
Wow. That's nice.
And it says the show reveals missing chapters of the Russian artist's life. So this was from a particular collection that had been shown. So yeah, but you see a lot of what turned into the original set design from Fiddler on the Roof. The little houses over there and the very, you can see the little characters. Like we were all real characters, we were people.
Yeah. So
the original album cover artwork, that yellow album from the Broadway show, is also has that kind of vibe, like that. Painting.
Of course, I mean that's
over
the classic.
here in my house, you can see the Chagall windows.
My question was, I mean, we've all done so many calls, so many Zoom calls. Do you set this up for every call that you do, or is it just for this one?
I'm at my parents' house right now. I flew today, and so I'm in Florida. So I thought I have to find something to just give me some kind of a background because we're moving out of the house. And it's my parents' house, so there's lots and lots of Jewish artifacts and art. So
that's great. And I wanted to bring up the classic Zero Mostel cover for everyone. I mean, this is the standard. It's so that would have been when did it hit Broadway? My mom said she saw it in '71.
64.
64 is when it hit Broadway. So that's interesting.
I saw that same revival with Zero in '71.
Yeah.
That your mom.
Yeah. That's something. And Jackie, for what it's worth, Renee is saying that you're clearly a mensch as well. I gave you a shout out, gave you a hello back when you were crying a little upset that Joanne was getting all the hellos earlier in the show.
Oh, I see. So you're getting a pity hello. I'll take it.
A pity hello. Yeah, it was a pity hello. I won't deny that at all.
Can you tell us what some of the other things you've been in, because there've been many. Jackie,
me?
Go first? Yeah.
Oh, wasn't there a bio distributed?
I was on air. No.
The resume. People can Google me.
You have a very funny. I looked at your Twitter feed. It's very funny.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So thank you, Joanne.
And if you've never seen Jackie's act, it's unbelievable. It's irreverent and brilliant and satisfying. Really loved it.
Thank you. Directed by Michael Shirali, who made this shit up, I think we'd say.
Yes. He introduced us, and my husband knows your husband, Michael Ritz. He worked with him years ago when we were first dating, I think it was, and that's how. And we I guess we saw you in that benefit that Seth Rudetsky did. I don't think we got to say hello afterwards, but yeah.
Well, you mean the red bucket
of the year, or
the red bucket? Yeah,
Right.
2018 it was.
That was, I don't know if you remember, but
And Joe Gray was performed in it.
Yes, we were running the show downtown at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and we were actually on like a little hiatus for the holidays, and that was when the horrible events at the Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue happened. And while we were all not even doing the show, we immediately said, we need to start raising money for the Jewish community. And we actually got together with Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. And so we donated a portion of our fundraising to the Tree of Life Synagogue in the Pittsburgh community. And so when they asked us to perform as part of this, I had said, Tree of Life is Eitz Chaim He. And that was how, when we were discussing what to do, they wanted us to sing Sabbath Prayer. And I said, well, why don't we start it with Eitz Chaim He Lama Chazikim Ba, which is, it's a tree of life, and so we wound up being able to put Joel into it because he read that translation of that prayer. Then we sang it in Hebrew, and then we kind of transitioned into Sabbath Prayer. It was a meeting of a lot of different minds, but it was a very beautiful moment to share with the company on stage, and Joel was spectacular.
He was.
Jackie?
We saw him before the show, like, I don't know. It was just funny. I know that he was like having a Coke at McDonald's around the corner.
Jackie, can you tell us?
He eats like we do. Like, yeah.
Tell us about kissing Jessica Stein.
Wow, you're digging all the way back, huh? What do you want to know?
Was she a good kisser?
Very good kisser, Heather. It's a classic that endures. It was a really great thing to be a part of. Jen Westfeld is a doll, and Charlie Wormfeld was a really nice director, and it was still unfortunately too rare for me that I'm able to get a role that, that's big enough to really take a bite out of, and to be comical and big on film, and also be quiet, So it was a great project to be a part of, and I got to wear a pregnancy pad. I would scare people around me because we'd film outside and they didn't know it was a fake pad, and I'd run into walls.
As much as we're loving Fiddler, and in all its forms and the different productions, what is next on the horizon? It doesn't, a production, a role doesn't define you. It doesn't limit you. What do you see next? What would you like to do if you could wave a magic wand? Is there a role outside the Fiddler universe that you would like to play?
Are you asking both ladies?
Yeah, starting with you, Jackie.
Oh, starting with me? Oh boy, it's just really so hard when the whole business has taken such a dive.
It is.
I mean, I would be grateful to get, back on the boards in any capacity, but
so what about if you could play any role, what's your dream role that you've always wanted to
everybody
play?
Always asks me this, and I never I'm any role can become a dream or a nightmare, really.
True.
I'm not a person who has a favorite anything, but my standard answer is usually Martha and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in Yiddish.
In Yiddish. Joanne?
Oh, well, I've already said that I want to play Tevye.
Well, you said outside, but see, I said outside fiddler.
I know, but I really want to play Tevye.
There's no outside fiddler.
If I'm really going to be honest, I when I was doing when Once closed, I thought, you know, the next job I really want to get on Broadway is Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia closed. I can't tell you how much I want to be in Mamma Mia. I want to wear those clothes. I want to sing those songs. And every time I've seen the show, it's so much fun. And I don't need to be profound. I just want to make people happy.
Who doesn't like ABBA? I mean,
who doesn't like it?
Right?
Can I tell you what? I saw it in London before I came to New York. And I was like, I was very lukewarm about ABBA. I was lukewarm about seeing this show. And at the end of the show, I was on my feet like, Waterloo! I lost my mind. In England, it's very hard to go to the theater and be the one who's lost your mind about how much you love the show. But everyone was the same way. It just was so inspiring and fun. Okay, so now you all think less of me. She wants to be Martha.
You could wear a lycra jumpsuit and look fabulous.
I think, Joanne, you were in the show after Fiddler that you said you had told me about. That was at university in this
Shanghai Sonatas.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So I was able, three of us from Fiddler, Adam Shapiro and Stephanie Lynn Mason and I went on to do a show called Shanghai Sonatas, which was about the community in Shanghai that welcomed a lot of Holocaust survivors. And our musical director, Zalman Malotik's father, was one of the Shanghai Jews. That's what they called the community there. And so we learned so much about Chinese culture. It was so amazing to work with this incredible cast, which was more than half Asian and Pacific American, and the musical director and the composer was from Shanghai, and the director's parents were in Shanghai, and they were in the middle of dealing with the pandemic. And he was like describing what quarantine was like for his parents. And we're like, isn't that interesting? Not knowing what was going to be coming up next. But I have to say that working with, we're in a world where you're sort of not allowed to talk about race. Like, you're not allowed to ask certain questions because you're always like, why are you so ignorant of my culture? And why is it that, but we were literally telling a story where we were getting to know the other people's cultures. And so it was really exciting to be able, and everyone opened up, everyone talked about their background, everyone explained where their parents were from and how they ended up here. And it was a very beautiful 3-week experience. And I hope that the show is going to have some more life. I think they're going to be doing a broadcast on Saturday of this. But it was at the University of Delaware, and it's going to have a long life. They're doing lots and lots of revisions, which is really how you make a good show. Like Fiddler on the Roof didn't drop down on the planet. It was worked on
Sure.
for many years. And I think that the story of Shanghai Sonatas has the opportunity to tell the story of communities coming together and how much more we have in common. Like, there's more that unites us than divides us. And I'm hoping to do it again. It was really fun.
It's interesting you should mention that, because I do remember learning about the Shanghai Jews in college. And when you think about, Fiddler, getting back to the universality of it, the Jewish community in India, in Bombay, for example, the Jewish community, or what's left of the Jewish community in Cairo, where I lived for 2 years. Think about my roommate's senior year. Michael will remember David Brodsky, who taught me everything I know about Judaism. I even kept Shabbos one weekend. That's a story for another day. But he spent a semester in Santa Cruz. And so it occurred to me the idea of doing performances of Fiddler in language in these other communities, for these other communities. And then, the conversations, kind of the after production conversation, what that would spark, what that would be like for people to talk about these themes in Shanghai, in India, in Santa Cruz, etc.
Well, when you see the documentary, you'll see how many languages the show has been produced in.
Sure.
So it really does hit a lot of different communities, but it's nice to tell these stories because every community has a story, and I think that identity theater is very important. And
I'll go to see that show when it comes. It sounds fascinating.
I want to make sure we got Leslie's comment. Leslie Kleiman Gleaner. Leslie, I assume, Joanne?
Yes.
So you were great. Leslie Kleiman, she was specifying, great in Kids in Yiddish, better than Mamma Mia. Here we go again. All right. Mark Lee, a friend of ours from North Carolina, asks, what is the weirdest remake of Fiddler that you've heard about? Any interesting, if not weird, interesting, off the wall, most creative? Have there been any real poetic licenses taken with the original with the story, with the script? Anything you can think of?
Well, the Robbins estate kept a very tight lid on it. To the point where even when high schools rented the show, they gave you a book with all of the staging in it, and they expected you to reproduce the staging.
Really?
Yeah, and Sheldon Harnick, bless him, is still with us. So he was part of the original creative team, and so hopefully he'll remain with us for a while. He of course was aware of our show, and he was very particular about how the lyrics were translated. So I mean, there's part of the original guard. They're keeping a close eye on it. So I don't think you do like what Oklahoma did and serve chili and have video. And we were doing it in Yiddish was one of the wackiest things out there.
It was.
Oh yeah, they thought that what we were doing was radical because we cut the cast down but it's amazing how authentic it was, even though we changed the costume design and the set design
But there, with
what
other
is
productions,
the reputation of the Folksbiene Theater, company?
What is the reputation?
I mean, no, what is it done for their world? Because
it was huge for them. I mean, it had transferred off Broadway. It really put them on the map, and I mean, they've always been in their place on the map.
Right. I mean, they've been around for over 100 years, but this was the thing that really opened up their audience to, I mean, the number of people that were seeing the show, we didn't just have matinee altacapas. We had an incredibly diverse crowd out there, which is incredible for Fiddler, but incredible for a Yiddish show. And
we were only supposed to reach audiences for 6 weeks, and we reached them for a year and a half.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, I see, I know of the theater, but it's only really, I think people know about it since Fiddler. Mm-hmm. So it's a great thing because it's such a dying, so few people speak Yiddish.
Renee just mentioned that the New York Times did a nice piece on Sheldon Harnick. Here is the piece, Sheldon Harnick working from home for 55 years.
Oh, wow. Great article.
Lyricist and many other shows, has worked at home in his apartment he shares with his wife, Marjorie. So this is a nice piece, and we'll certainly, looks like there's several photos. We can just take a quick look at that. Let's see, we could just bring that up real quick.
What is the opportunity lamp?
He said in the article, he talks about how that was the original stove that came with the house, and they thought it was so cute they'd keep it. Not bad.
That's nice.
This is
Another ad for
the
Sotheby's.
pandemic is I'm seeing how nice other people live.
Is that a
one thing
Hirschfield
that's
behind you?
I'm sorry.
Is that a Hirschfield drawing behind you?
Me?
Jackie, yeah.
Oh, I don't have a Hirschfeld.
Oh, okay. It looked like
The poster of a Jerry Lewis movie.
Oh, okay.
Well, again, this has been great. And for folks who, I'll share the link to the article in Facebook so people can read the piece. So I'll just do that real quick.
Neil, what is this Hindu thing? Do you have a Jewish parent and an Indian parent?
I don't. So I'll be happy to explain. There are different variations on that theme. Hindu, good Jew is another one. So my parents. Well, yeah, that's a much longer conversation.
Oh,
yeah. Well, okay. I grew up going to services. I've been to a Quaker service, a Catholic service. Spent time in a First Reformed church in high school. The Jewish community at Wesleyan. Lived in Egypt for 2 years. Learned a lot about Islam. Ended up in a Unitarian church, and I'm very happy there. That's the 30-second version. But Hindu, my parents were Hindu. I spent a lot of time with the Jewish community in college. I mean, to the extent that they counted me in the minyan. Okay, my friend David Brodsky for a Havdalah service one Saturday. We're sitting around, not counting because you don't count on Saturday evenings, right? But waiting for another person to join us before we could start. And he's like, "Oh, great, we can start. We're almost there." And I look around. I'm thinking, "You're not. Don't look at me." Like,
it's okay because we don't count in the Orthodox services either. So.
Well, yeah, the Orthodox that's a different thing. And even an incredible tribute the senior year at Wesleyan when they said goodbye to the seniors. They had me join the center of the group and said bye to me. I mean, I was very much, like I said, I had 2 women come up to me my senior year saying, "Neil, we just found out you don't know Hebrew and you're not Jewish, but you know the service backward and forwards. What's that about?" So Hindu or good Jew. So I could be a good Jew, or good Jew is short for Gujarati, which is what my parents, the state in India where they're from, Gujarat. So it's a little play on words, but you could do good Jew, you could do Hindu, whatever you want to do, you could say either way. On the one hand, there's this.
And I'm being told that I'll become an honorary Desi at some point.
Yeah,
absolutely.
South Asian, and certainly Rose is that. The other thing here, Debbie points out that if your parents are Hindu and Jewish, sometimes they say Om Shalom.
Om Shalom.
The other way to describe. So Hindu weddings are not that uncommon, of course, and then they also say they Om Shalom. Let's look at a couple of other quick comments. Sudha says, "Jackie and Joanne, thank you so much for your thanks. You brought back so many memories. You gave interesting descriptions about your acting in Fiddler." And it's just great to see that, and so many other comments coming in here. And Renee says, "I was fortunate enough to work with Neil's mother." And Jonathan says, there are Spanish Latino Jews, including my Mexican cousins.
Wow.
And Michael says, "Represent."
That's the Wesleyan. And I didn't know.
Folks, I told these wonderful actors that we would have them. We'd only keep them for 35 minutes.
11:18, right? We still have another hour to go. I mean, the show must go on. No.
Yeah, and Jonathan says, "Great change of pace show." Can I just ask one thing, because you're both here? The use of the word actor versus actress. When did you consciously decide, if you did, that that's the word you would prefer in your work? How did that come to be? I grew up, of course, with the word actress. I'm 50 years old, so that's my world. Joanne?
Well, you don't call a female doctor a doctress, so I'm an actor. It's the same profession.
And Joanne?
And I think when we were working with the contract, with the union contract and the Broadway contract, they made a very conscious decision to take away gender, because I think as we were, and long before this conversation was coming up, I mean, I've been on the board for over 20 years, and by then it was capital A actor, and capital A actor meant actor, actress, chorus person, principal actor, and stage managers. So we were always talking about capital A actors meant the actors on contract. So I like to think of myself as a capital A actor.
But of course, you grew up, that wasn't the terminology, and that's how life changes and America changes and the world changes, right?
Listen, and it's changing fast, and we have to, I mean, we're doing all these Zooms, and now on the Zoom, we're expected to put our pronouns on, because we're trying to be, we're trying to make it okay for people to have whatever program.
Gender fluidity.
Yeah. And
Neil has written about the importance of announcing what your pronoun is in office settings and other places. So with that, let's call it a night. We're just so grateful to Joanne and Jackie for being here. As was said, this is a real change of pace show in the middle of all the terrible things going on. We smiled, we laughed, we brought back great memories for so many people. So we're very grateful to all of you. And Joanne and Jackie, if you get a moment and can retweet the video, that would be great, or on